3,000 years ago, the sages of ancient Greece stumbled upon something that would forever alter the course of human history. They discovered that the universe is made of numbers, that behind the apparent chaos lies a perfect mathematical order, an invisible harmony that governs everything that exists. And then, 2,500 years later, a man in an office in Berlin rediscovered that very same truth. His name was Albert Einstein. And what he found through the lens of modern physics was identical to what the ancients knew through contemplation, but this connection has been deliberately hidden from you. Why? Because it threatens the official narrative that science started from scratch, that the ancients were primitive, that only we moderns have access to the truth. What I'm about to reveal will completely change how you see Einstein and how you see the history of human knowledge. If you're watching this right now, you're different from most. You don't accept the superficial answers that the system offers. You seek deeper connections. And that's exactly what I'm going to reveal to you. In Einstein's office in Berlin, on the wall, were 3 portraits, just 3 people: Michael Faraday, James Clerk Maxwell, and Arthur Schopenhauer. The first 2 were physicists, pioneers of electromagnetism. It makes sense that Einstein admired them. But Schopenhauer was a philosopher, a 19th century German philosopher who never wrote an equation in his life. Why would Einstein place his portrait alongside giants of physics? The answer will shock you, and you need to understand this before continuing. Schopenhauer wasn't just any philosopher. He was obsessed with ancient texts, specifically the Upanishads, the sacred texts of India that were written over 3,000 years ago. Schopenhauer called the Upanishads the solace of my life and death. When Schopenhauer discovered these ancient texts through a Latin translation called Upnekat, his life changed. He wrote that it was the most rewarding and elevating reading possible in the world, and that it would be the consolation of his entire existence. And here's the point that no one wants you to realize. Schopenhauer didn't just read the Upanishads, he based his entire philosophy on them. His central idea, that the world is a manifestation of a single cosmic will. That reality as we perceive it is an illusion, that behind appearances there is a fundamental unity. All of this comes directly from Vedic philosophy. The Upanishads teach that Brahman, the ultimate reality, is identical to Atman, the individual consciousness, that the separation between you and the universe is Maya, illusion, that everything is fundamentally one. And Einstein was obsessed with Schopenhauer. Friends and colleagues often found Einstein reading random passages from The World as will and representation. Schopenhauer's major work, Konrad Wachsmann, an architect who knew Einstein, recalled that he often sat with one of Schopenhauer's well-worn volumes and seemed so content, as if he were engaged with a serene and joyful work. Einstein considered Schopenhauer a genius and quoted a phrase of his constantly: "Man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills." Einstein said that this phrase accompanied him in all situations of life, that it helped him to endure the actions of others, and even his own actions, with good humor. But it wasn't just about free wills. It was about something much deeper, something that connected Einstein to a current of wisdom that flowed from the Upanishads, from the Vedic texts, from the same sources that inspired the first Greek philosophers. You're starting to see the connection, and this is just the beginning. Pythagoras, the Greek genius who lived 500 years before Christ, is famous for his theorem, the relationship between the sides of a right triangle, but few people know what he really taught. Pythagoras traveled extensively before founding his school. He went to Egypt, where he studied with the priests for 22 years. He went to Babylon, where he learned mathematics and astronomy. There are even accounts that he traveled to India, where he may have come into contact with the same Vedic teachings that would later influence Schopenhauer. When he returned to Greece, Pythagoras founded a mystery school in Crotona, a closed community where initiates studied the nature of the universe. But it wasn't just intellectual study. It was a way of life. The Pythagoreans practiced rituals, followed specific diets, observed silence for extended periods. Why so much ritual to study mathematics? Because, for Pythagoras, mathematics wasn't just a tool. It was a way to access the divine truth. Studying numbers was studying the mind of the universe. And Pythagoras' central discovery was simple but revolutionary. Numbers govern the universe. Everything that exists can be described mathematically. The harmony we hear in music is the same harmony that governs the stars. Pythagoras discovered that musical intervals correspond to precise mathematical ratios. A string divided in half produces an octave. Divided into 2/3 produces a fifth. Divided into 3/4 produces a fourth, and so on. But here's what few understand. Pythagoras didn't see this as an interesting curiosity. He saw it as proof that the universe is fundamentally mathematical. If the beauty we hear in music can be reduced to numerical proportions, then perhaps all beauty, all order, all harmony in the cosmos is also mathematical. And that's exactly what he discovered when he looked to the heavens. The planets move in patterns. Their orbits follow proportions, the same kind of proportions that create harmony in music. Pythagoras called this the music of the spheres, the silent symphony of the cosmos, inaudible to us, but perfectly harmonic. And 2,500 years later, Einstein would arrive at exactly the same conclusion by a completely different path. In 1936, Einstein published an article in the Journal of the Franklin Institute called Physics and Reality. And in it, he wrote something that echoed perfectly the Pythagorean teachings. The most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. Think about that for a moment. Einstein was amazed that mathematical equations, abstract symbols created by the human mind, can accurately predict the behavior of atoms and galaxies. Why does the universe obey mathematics? Why can the laws of physics be written in equations? Why does order exist instead of chaos? Why does the same mathematics that describes the trajectory of a falling apple also describe the orbit of Jupiter around the Sun? Einstein's answer was the same as Pythagoras. Because the universe is mathematical in its essence, mathematics is not a tool we invented to describe reality. Mathematics is reality. And that's exactly the Pythagorean view. Numbers govern the universe. Wow, but hold on, because the connection goes even deeper. And you need to hear this before forming your opinion. In 1921, Einstein gave a lecture at the Prussian Academy of Sciences called Geometry and Experience. In it, he posed a question that echoes through the centuries. How can it be that mathematics, being after all a product of human thought which is independent of experience, is so admirably appropriate to the objects of reality? This is the same question Pythagoras asked 2,500 years ago. Why does the universe obey our equations? Why does abstract geometry describe real space? Why do invented numbers correspond to physical phenomena? Einstein didn't have a definitive answer, but he sensed something profound, something the ancients already knew. And in 1949, Einstein wrote something in his autobiographical notes that few people know about. He said that a scientist may appear as a Platonist or a Pythagorean, insofar as he considers the point of view of logical simplicity as an indispensable tool of his research. Einstein wasn't just making an abstract observation, he was describing himself. He was admitting that his scientific approach was fundamentally Pythagorean and Platonic. And what does this mean in practice? It means that Einstein sought simplicity and beauty in his theories. He believed that the fundamental laws of the universe should be elegant, mathematically beautiful. This isn't a scientific criterion in the strict sense. It's an aesthetic criterion, philosophical, Pythagorean, and it worked. The theory of relativity is considered one of the most beautiful theories in physics, not just because it's correct, but because it's elegant, symmetrical, harmonious, exactly as Pythagoras would have expected. Plato, the disciple of Socrates, developed Pythagorean ideas even further. In his dialogue, Timaeus, Plato describes the creation of the universe as an act of divine geometry. The creator, the demiurge, used perfect mathematical proportions to construct the cosmos. The Platonic solids, the tetrahedron with 4 faces, the cube with 6, the octahedron with 8, the icosahedron with 20, the dodecahedron with 12, were seen as the fundamental building blocks of reality, each associated with an element: fire, earth, air, water, and the ether that permeates the cosmos. And you know what's absolutely fascinating? Modern physics has discovered that subatomic particles exhibit geometric symmetries, that the fundamental laws of nature are expressed through mathematical groups with specific geometric structures, that the structure of the universe is profoundly geometric, at levels that Plato could never have imagined. Plato was right. 3,000 years before quantum physics, before the standard model of particles, before string theory. But why was this hidden from you? Why do schools teach that the ancients were primitive, that only modern science has access to the truth? The answer is disturbing, and you need to understand it. Because if you knew that the ancients had already discovered fundamental truths about the universe, you would question the narrative of linear progress. You would realize that wisdom isn't a monopoly of the moderns. You would start seeking knowledge in sources they want you to ignore. And more importantly, you would realize that the truth is accessible to any sincere person. Not just scientists with degrees, not just specialists with funding. The truth is available to whoever seeks it with reverence. Einstein knew this, and that's why he studied philosophy as intensely as physics. He once said, "Without philosophical thought, I would have contributed nothing to science." The greatest physicist of the 20th century said that without philosophy, he would have contributed nothing. This goes against everything the modern educational system teaches, that science and philosophy are separate things, that you don't need to think deeply to make discoveries, that specialization is more important than a broad vision. But Einstein knew the truth that the ancients knew, that the search for understanding the universe is both scientific and philosophical, that you can't separate mathematics from contemplation, physics from metaphysics. There's another fact we need to examine, and it connects everything in a surprising way. In 1930, Einstein met personally with Rabindranath Tagore, the Indian poet and philosopher who won the Nobel Prize in Literature. Tagore was deeply versed in the Vedic traditions, in the Upanishads, in the same texts that had transformed Schopenhauer. The conversations between Einstein and Tagore were recorded and published, and reveal something extraordinary. Einstein was willing to consider seriously the mystical view. That consciousness is fundamental to reality. Tagore argued that truth and beauty depend on the human observer, that without consciousness to perceive them, they wouldn't exist in the full sense. And Einstein, the great advocate of scientific objectivity, admitted that he couldn't completely refute that view. Decades later, quantum physics would prove that the observer affects the outcome of the experiment, that particles behave differently when they are observed. That consciousness and reality are intertwined in ways that we still don't fully understand. Einstein foresaw this through his conversations with a sage who knew the ancient texts, and this truth has a name: Philosophia perennis, perennial philosophy. The term was coined in the 16th century by Agostino Steuco, an Italian bishop. He used it to describe those basic truths that are present in all times, in all peoples. A science derived from the single principle, the universe, cosmos. But the idea is much older than the name. The perennial philosophy is the notion that there's a fundamental truth, an eternal wisdom that transcends all cultures and eras. Pythagoras discovered part of it through numbers. Plato developed another part through geometry. The sages of India codified another part in the Upanishads. The Hermetics of Egypt preserved another in the texts attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. The Jewish Kabbalists found another in the structure of the Zohar, and they were all describing the same reality, through different paths, with different languages, but converging on the same truths. Einstein, through Schopenhauer's The World as Will and Representation, through physics, through his conversations with Tagore, rediscovered this same eternal truth. And here is the central revelation that you need to understand, the revelation that changes everything. Truth belongs to no era, to no culture, to no institution. Truth is encoded in the very structure of the universe, cosmos, and anyone who observes nature with genuine reverence inevitably finds the same thing. Pythagoras found it through music and numbers, Plato through geometry and forms, the Vedic sages through meditation and contemplation, Schopenhauer through philosophy and reason, Einstein through equations and experiments. The language changes, the methods change, the eras change, but the truth remains the same, because it is the truth of the universe cosmos itself. Einstein expressed this poetically when he said, "The most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science." He didn't say that the most important experience is having the right data, or the most advanced equipment, or the most generous funding, or the most prestigious degrees. He said it's the experience of mystery, the same experience the ancients had when contemplating the stars, the same reverence Pythagoras felt when discovering a new proportion, the same admiration Plato described when his soul recognized an eternal truth. 99% of people go through their entire lives without ever experiencing this, without ever stopping to contemplate the mystery of the universe cosmos, without ever asking why there is something instead of nothing, without ever marveling at the fact that abstract numbers describe real galaxies. But you're here, listening to this, because something in you knows there's more. Something in you has always known that reality is deeper than you were taught, and that something is what the ancients called the divine spark, the fragment of infinity that dwells within you. Einstein called this the cosmic religious feeling. It wasn't faith in a personal God who answers prayers. It wasn't dogma or ritual or submission to authorities. It was the direct experience of the cosmic order. The immediate perception that the universe cosmos is governed by sublime mathematical laws. The reverent admiration before the mystery of existence. And this experience, the ancients knew it well. They cultivated it through contemplative practices. They transmitted it from master to disciple. It was the central secret of the mystery schools. But at some point in history, this knowledge was separated from science. Contemplation was divorced from investigation. And we were told that to be scientific, you need to be cold, objective, dispassionate. That admiration and reverence are for religious people, not for scientists. Einstein proved that this is a destructive lie. His greatest discoveries came from intuitive insights, flashes of understanding that he could only describe as almost mystical experiences. He once said, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift." You understand the depth of what he said. Intuition is more fundamental than reason. Contemplation precedes analysis. Admiration comes before the equation, exactly as the ancients taught millennia ago. Pythagoras didn't discover the theorem through pure step-by-step logic. He had an insight, a revelation, and then used reason to prove what he already knew intuitively. Plato spoke of knowledge as reminiscence. The soul already knows the truth because it is eternal. It just needs to remember what it has always known. And Einstein, the greatest modern scientist, was saying essentially the same thing. You've just discovered the secret they're hiding. Einstein didn't invent anything from scratch. He rediscovered ancient truths through a modern language. He reconnected science with philosophy, physics with metaphysics, the modern with the eternal. Truths like these are suppressed because they threaten power structures. They threaten the idea that you need experts to understand the world. They threaten the narrative that only accredited institutions have access to the truth. They threaten the monopoly of knowledge that certain elites want to maintain. When you click on Super Thanks, you're not paying for entertainment. You're supporting the revelation of knowledge they want to keep hidden. It's you saying that the truth matters more than convenience, that ancient wisdom deserves to be recovered, that hidden connections deserve to be exposed. The truth is, Einstein left us a map that connects past and present, science and wisdom, reason and intuition, modernity and eternity. That map says, look at the ancients with respect. They knew things we are still rediscovering. The truth is not the property of any era. It's available to anyone who seeks it with sincerity and reverence. Pythagoras found it in Crotona 2,500 years ago. Plato developed it in Athens. The sages of India preserved it in the Upanishads. Schopenhauer recovered it in the 19th century. Einstein proved it in the 20th century. This stream of wisdom flows through time like an underground river. Sometimes it emerges on the surface. Sometimes it runs hidden, but it never stops flowing. And you can connect to it now. Not through secret rituals or hidden initiations, not through expensive degrees or academic credentials, but through the sincere contemplation of the universe cosmos that surrounds you. Look at the stars tonight and ask why they obey equations you can write on a sheet of paper. Observe a seashell and see the perfect spiral that obeys the golden ratio, the same ratio that appears in galaxies, in hurricanes, in flower petals. Listen to music and realize that the intervals that move you are precise mathematical ratios, the same ratios that Pythagoras discovered 2.5 millennia ago. The universe cosmos is constantly revealing its mathematical nature. It's constantly proving that the ancients were right, that numbers govern everything, that geometry is the language of the cosmos. And when you realize this, when you really see with new eyes, something changes in you forever. You experience what Einstein called the cosmic religious feeling, the reverence before the mystery, the admiration before the order, the astonishment before the beauty. This is what the ancients cultivated. This is what Einstein experienced every day in his work, and this is available to you right now. In this very moment, as you listen to these words, controversial perhaps. Did I go too far connecting Einstein with the ancients? Do you agree that he rediscovered age-old truths, or do you think it was pure coincidence? Comment, ancient truth or coincidence? I'll be responding to everyone in the first 2 hours. And tell me, have you ever had a moment of profound awe before the cosmos? An instant when you perceived the order behind the chaos? When the mathematics of nature left you speechless? When you felt you were touching something eternal? If this video showed you something new, if it made you question what you've been taught, if it connected you with a current of wisdom that flows through the centuries, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because next week, I'm going to reveal how Einstein found the same formula in the pyramids of Egypt, mathematical proportions that the builders knew 4,000 years ago, and why this has been deliberately suppressed from the history books until the next video. And remember, truth has no expiration date. What was true 3,000 years ago is still true today. The universe hasn't changed, only our ability to perceive it. And you have eyes to see.